The drone attacks on key Saudi Arabian oil facilities were also a main topic of discussion on the Sunday morning shows. Here are some of what you may have missed.
This all comes from the Yemeni civil war, where Saudi Arabia is heavily involved in another country, indiscriminately bombing civilians, killing children, and then the Houthis are supported by the Iranians. So it's back and forth, but really the answer is trying to have a negotiated ceasefire and peace in Yemen, and bombing Iran won't do that.
Secretary Pompeo has made clear that the Iranian regime is responsible for this attack on civilian areas and infrastructure vital to our global energy supply, and we're not going to stand for that. In fact, our Department of Energy stands ready to tap into this strategic reserve, petroleum reserve, if we must, to stabilize the global energy supply. But more importantly, Secretary Pompeo and Secretary Treasury Mnuchin just this last week stood in the White House press briefing room and announced additional sanctions.
If I were in the Oval Office, my focus would be on making sure this doesn't escalate into further instability, conflict, and not only danger to world oil supply, but danger to peace. Look, right now, there is more than enough destabilizing the Middle East and the Persian Gulf without fears that a president could destabilize it further with the next tweet.
I think it's very clear this was the Iranians.
Do we need to provide proof?
It's a very significant escalation, and I would say we got to do several things. First of all, I would say we should deny the visas for the Iranian delegates who are planning to come into the United States, come to New York next week for the UN General Assembly
all of them.
meetings.
The president,
the Iranians, as Secretary,
the foreign minister, every one of them.
The Iranians is
okay.
Absolutely.
For more insight, let's bring in CBSN contributor Sean Sullivan. He is a national politics reporter for the Washington Post with a focus on the 2020 presidential campaign. Sean joins us now from Washington. Sean, thanks so much for being with us. President Trump is operating without a national security advisor. What are some of the challenges he could face in responding to these attacks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's certainly a difficult time if you're president to not have your full national security foreign policy team and to have signs of instability within that team. And that's what the president is experiencing right now. And there are a number of things that this administration is going to have to weigh in the coming days. I mean, it seems clear from what we've heard from Secretary Pompeo, from what we've heard from Kellyanne Conway, from what we've heard from the administration on the whole, that they are standing pretty full force behind their accusations against Iran. The question is, where does this go from here? Because you know, as you were talking about a few minutes ago, the Iranian relationship with the United States has been one that has been pretty unstable, pretty tense over the past few months. This is only going to add tension to that. You're hearing ideas from some Republicans about how to take some sort of actions in response to Iran. On the Democratic side, you're hearing some Democrats say, you know, well, show us some proof, show us some evidence if the administration truly believes that the Iranians are responsible for this. So it's a tense situation that seems to be growing really ever more tense by the hour here. And there's also the consideration about what this will do to gas prices globally and in the United States. The economic impact on this is something that Americans and voters could potentially feel in the near future. So there's a lot to weigh here for this administration. And again, it's a challenge when you don't have the full force of your national security foreign policy team, you know, with you at this point in time.
And Sean, we know Republicans and Democrats have been critical of President Trump's relationship with the Saudi kingdom in the past. How are lawmakers in Washington reacting to these reports?
Well, I think it's a split right now. I mean, you're hearing Republicans generally, and it's early, obviously, at this point, but generally stand behind the president and the administration. You're hearing more skepticism from Democrats about their posture. And you're right, there has been concern, not just among Democrats, but among Republicans, too, about this administration, about the president's relationship with Saudi Arabia. So I think there are going to be a lot of questions about this coming from Capitol Hill in the coming days. They're going to look at and probably press this administration to provide more information about what it has learned and what it knows about these attacks. So certainly a story that I don't think is going away anytime soon, Elaine.
Probably not. Well, let's switch gears now and discuss something you wrote about recently for the Washington Post. The presidential debates present an opportunity for candidates to challenge the frontrunners. We saw Senator Kamala Harris do that in the first debate when she went after Joe Biden's record on busing. This past week, there was a heated moment between the former vice president and former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Julián Castro. Let's go ahead and listen to some of that exchange.
Are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Being for it.
Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago? I mean, I can't believe that you said 2 minutes ago that they had to buy in, and now you're saying they don't have to buy. You're forgetting that.
I said anyone like your grandmother who has no money.
We need a healthcare system.
You're automatically
enrolls people regardless of whether they choose to opt in or not. If you lose your job, for instance, his health care plan would not automatically enroll you. You would have to opt in. My health care plan would. That's a big difference. I'm fulfilling the legacy of Barack Obama, and you're not.
I'll be surprised to him. Andrew Yang.
This is why presidential debates are becoming unwatchable. This reminds everybody of what they cannot stand about Washington. Scoring points against each other, poking at each other, and telling each other that you're my plan, your plan. Look, we all
that's called a Democratic primary election. That's called an election. That's an election. You know, this is what we're here for. It's an election.
So, Sean, that was an exchange that got a lot of attention. How did it go over with the public?
It did get a lot of attention. We'll find out in the coming days as we're likely to see public polls looking at how people reacted to this debate, about how the public viewed that. But as soon as that debate ended, there were a number of Democratic strategists who felt that that attack could backfire on Castro, felt that that was something that, you know, might not help him in this race. When you look at the contest right now, it's very clear that since the moment he got into this race, Joe Biden has been the leading candidate, has continued to be the leading candidate in the polls, and you've seen a number of candidates try to go after him. The challenge, though, for them, and my colleagues at the Post have some reporting on this, is, you know, when they attack Biden at one of these debates or in a campaign speech or in some other setting, how can they do it in a way that not only, you know, potentially diminishes his standing among Democratic voters, but helps them. And what we've seen so far in a lot of cases is they haven't really figured out how to crack that code, how to go after Biden in a way that helps them in the polls. Because as you alluded to, we've heard from Senator Harris. We saw what Secretary Castro brought up at the last debate. It's not clear that these attacks have actually helped these candidates against Joe Biden. So there really hasn't been a true recipe for success for some of these candidates who are trying to catch Biden in the polls about how to go after him and how to help themselves.
Right. It's very much an open question how effective those attacks against Joe Biden have been. Well, the next Democratic debate is in mid-October. Candidates have until the end of this month to raise money. How important are third quarter numbers?
Very, very important. As we head into the fall, these candidates are looking at needing a few things. One, they're needing to stockpile cash so that they have the money to put an infrastructure in place in these early states, in Iowa and New Hampshire. You're going to start seeing TV ads, radio ads, more online advertisements from these campaigns, and they cost money. And so these candidates need to stockpile that money to have a shot at competing in these states. But the other part of this is these fundraising reports are also a signal of how much enthusiasm there is behind these campaigns, because these reports are going to be made public. So in a few weeks, we're going to be able to see which candidates raised the most money, how many donors they had, what their average donations were, and that's going to give us some clues about how much enthusiasm there is behind a candidate. And if a candidate is not raising money, that's going to raise questions about their long-term viability, about how much support there is for them. This is a hugely critical fundraising period for the candidates. And on top of that, it's difficult to raise money in the late summer, in July and August. You have a lot of donors on vacation, tuned out of politics. A lot of them are back now, and you're seeing these candidates sort of set up, you know, dozens of fundraisers for the end of this month. They're trying to scramble and make sure that they can put up a good number. This is one of the most important barometers we're going to see in this race.
Sean, I want to ask you about another topic. There was a big race in North Carolina earlier this week. Republican State Senator Dan Bishop defeated Democrat Dan McCready in the congressional special election for the 9th District. How are Republicans framing this contest?
Well, Republicans are framing this contest, I should say, as a victory for them. They're saying, look, this is a special election that the Republican candidate won. This is good for the Republicans. This is good for President Trump. This is a step in the right direction toward winning back the House. But on the other side, you're hearing, you know, very, very different take from Democrats. They look at this district and say, look, this is a pretty conservative district. This is a district that Trump won by double digits, and the Republican candidate in this race carried it by a much, much narrower margin. So they see this very differently. They look at this, the Democrats do, and they say this is a sign of the continuation of the success we had in 2018. We're starting to build more support in areas that had tended to lean conservative. We're starting to build more support in suburban areas, and this is a sign that heading into 2020, the Democrats feel that they have a pretty good chance at competing in some of these swing states. So we're hearing very, very different interpretations from both parties about the outcome of this special election.
Right, because Sean, as you know, North Carolina is this battleground state that the president narrowly won in 2016, and we know Democrats were looking at this particular race as a test to see if that blue wave of 2018 would continue as we head into an election year. How are Democrats feeling now?
Well, it is, again, a mixed picture because on the one hand, they did not win this race. But on the other hand, they look at the overall numbers and they are encouraged about this. And you're right, Elena, North Carolina is a crucial state in the overall 2020 election, not just in the presidential race, but there's a big battleground Senate contest as well. You have Senator Thom Tillis, a Republican, up for re-election next year. So not only is this a state where the presidency is a big issue, but the battle for control of the Senate is also a significant factor in North Carolina. This is a state that you can expect both parties to pour in a lot of resources over the next few months. And right now, again, Democrats look at this, and on the whole, they're generally satisfied with the way that they performed in this race, but it's not a win. The Republicans won this, and so for now, at least, the Republicans can lean on that victory and hope to build on it.
All right, Sean Sullivan in Washington for us. Sean, thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.